The fall of a princess. She once walked with power. Her name was known in every corner of the galaxy. Princess Zelari of the Zinthar Empire, beautiful, proud, and untouchable. Her voice could command fleets. Her orders could change the fate of planets. But now no one listened to her voice. It was silent, cracked, and lost in pain. The court had declared her guilty, not because she did something wrong, but because she said something true. She spoke against the Empire's cruelty. She asked for peace, for kindness to slaves, for fairness, and for that, they crushed her. Her own people turned their backs. Even her family stayed quiet. She was now alone. She was dragged into the public arena. Her clothes were torn away. Her body was bruised. Blood marked her knees and hands. Cameras from across the stars focused on her broken form. Everyone was watching. The crowds laughed, many cheered, some spat at the screen. "Traitor!" they shouted. "Crawl, weak one!" And she did. She crawled. Every step was slow. Her arms shook. Her knees burned. Her heart was full of shame. The ground was cold and it cut her skin. The floor seemed endless. The punishment was not death, but humiliation. The Empire believed shame was worse than death. Some aliens in the crowd threw trash at her. Others simply recorded her pain. No one moved to stop it. No one cared to help, except one. Among the watchers was a human. He wore a simple coat, standing at the back. He did not cheer. He did not laugh. His eyes were fixed on her, not with hate, not with disgust, but with something different. He looked angry, but not at her. Angry at what he was seeing. His name was Kale. Just a human, not rich, not important, not powerful, but inside him burned something the galaxy had forgotten. Honor. He watched as she slipped and hit the ground, hard. Her body didn't move for a few seconds. The crowd fell silent. Then came louder laughter. But Kale didn't laugh. His fists clenched. He took a breath. "She's still alive," he whispered to himself. "She doesn't deserve this." She lifted her face, just enough to look up, and for a moment, her eyes met his. She expected him to look away, to mock her like the others. But he didn't. He nodded just once. It was small, but it gave her the strength to crawl again. No one else saw it. No one else cared. But for Kale, that one look changed everything. He turned and walked away. But not to leave. He had something to plan, something that no one expected. He couldn't watch anymore. He couldn't just stand there and do nothing, not when someone was being crushed for telling the truth. Back in the arena, Princess Zelari reached the center. A voice from above shouted, "Let all who see this remember, this is the price of betrayal." But she was not a traitor. She was just too brave in a world ruled by fear. And far away in the shadows of the city, the human began to move. He didn't have soldiers. He didn't have weapons. But he had something stronger. The will to save someone who no longer believed she was worth saving. The galaxy kept watching. But it had no idea what was coming, because one human had decided she will not crawl alone anymore. The human who stood up, the crowd had already forgotten. To them, she was just another fallen name in the Empire's long list of public punishments. But Kale hadn't forgotten. He didn't leave to escape the scene, he left to return with purpose. The next day, the arena prepared for another round of humiliation. Princess Zelari was brought out again. Her body was weak, but her spirit had not broken completely. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply looked ahead with empty eyes. But in the far corner of the crowd, Kale was already there, watching, waiting. He didn't look like a hero, just a man in worn boots and a long coat. No badge, no weapon. But he walked through the crowd with steady steps. The guards didn't pay attention at first. Why would they? He was just another face among many. That was their mistake. As Zelari was pushed to the center again, Kale stepped forward. People around him whispered, confused. Then they gasped. He removed his coat and walked into the center of the circle. Slowly, with calm hands, he wrapped it around her shoulders. A sudden silence fell. The guards froze. The announcer choked mid-sentence. Cameras zoomed in. This wasn't part of the show. Kyle turned to the crowd. His voice wasn't loud, but it reached far. "She's not your entertainment." The guard shouted, "Step back. Human, leave now." But Kale didn't move. He looked down at the alien girl, still on her knees, shivering inside his coat. "Can you stand?" he asked gently. Xalari didn't answer, but her eyes filled with something no one had seen in them for a long time. Hope. The guards charged forward, but Kale was ready. He pulled a small flash device from his sleeve and slammed it to the ground. A burst of blinding light exploded. Screams filled the air. And in that chaos, Kale lifted Xalari into his arms and ran. The audience thought it was part of a stunt, until real alarms rang. Kale knew the exit tunnels under the arena. Old service paths, long unused. He had mapped them in his mind the night before. He moved fast, carrying her like she weighed nothing. Xalari clung to him, too weak to speak, but her heart was racing. No one had touched her with care in weeks. No one had lifted her except to throw her down. Now, someone carried her, not as a prisoner, but as a person. Behind them, shouts echoed. Searchlights turned on. Security bots flooded the arena. But they were already gone, slipping through cracks in the Empire's control. "Why?" she finally whispered. Kyle didn't look down. He kept running. "Because you don't belong in chains." She couldn't believe his words. She was punished, disgraced, hated by her own kind. Yet this stranger, this human, didn't see a criminal. He saw something else, something worth saving. They reached a small door and escaped into the cold night air of the lower city. The stars above were blurred by smoke and lights. But freedom had never looked more real. Kale placed her down gently in a corner, hiding in shadows. He checked her wounds, gave her water, and covered her legs with his own scarf. "I don't understand you," she whispered again. "You should have let me fall." He looked her straight in the eyes. "Everyone else did. That's why I won't." In the sky, the Empire's message changed. They no longer showed her as a traitor. They now called her a fugitive. And Kale? He was now labeled a threat, but none of that mattered to him. He didn't need a title or a reward. He just needed to do the right thing, and for the first time in her life, Xalari saw something stronger than power. Kindness without condition. She had no army, no throne. But now, she had one human. And that was the beginning of something the galaxy would never forget. The escape begins. The alarms didn't stop. They rang across the entire city. Every checkpoint, every tower, every sky drone received the order. Find the human. Find the fugitive princess. Use force. Kyle didn't. Wait! He carried Xalari through narrow alleys, staying low, moving fast. The lower levels of the city were forgotten by most. Broken streets, flickering lights, and shadows deep enough to hide a secret. But Kale knew them well. He had lived in those shadows. And now, they were his path to freedom. Xalari clung to him, her body still weak but her eyes more alert now. She felt every step, every breath he took to keep her safe. She had been surrounded by soldiers all her life, but no one had ever made her feel truly protected until this one human. Behind them, they heard the sharp buzz of security drones. A blue light scanned the area, passing just inches from them as they ducked behind a broken wall. Kyle held her close, breathing slow, waiting for the drone to pass. "We won't make it far like this," he whispered. "You should leave me," she said, her voice rough. "You'll survive without me." He looked at her, his expression serious. "Maybe. But then I'd be like the rest of them. And I refuse to be like the rest." She had no answer. No one had ever spoken to her like that, without fear, without pity. Just truth. Kale led her through a broken service door. Inside was an old tunnel, part of the city's first transport system. Now abandoned, now quiet. He had stashed supplies there, a blanket, a data pad, a stolen ID tag. They rested for a moment. Solari sat against the wall, her legs trembling. Kyle gave her water, gently placed his coat over her again. "I don't know who you are," she whispered. "You don't need to," he replied. "Just know I'm not letting them take you." A small smile touched her lips. It was weak, but real. In that dark tunnel, among the dust and danger, a bond was forming. One the galaxy would never understand. But outside, time was running out. A report came in. Kyle's image appeared on every newsfeed. Wanted human male, harboring a criminal, approach with caution, and Zalari's image too, still dressed in Kyle's coat, still looking like a girl who had nothing left but hope. "They've shut down the exits," Kyle said. "But I know one last path." He helped her stand. Step by step they moved deeper into the tunnels. Not toward safety, but toward a chance. The final tunnel ended under an old landing platform, rusted, unused. But Kale had prepared it. A small ship patched with scrap, barely flight-ready, was waiting. "It's not much," he said, "but it flies." Solari looked at it, then at him. "Why go this far? Why not just turn me in and walk away?" He sighed. "Because when I saw you crawl, I saw myself, someone crushed, someone forgotten. And I knew. You didn't need a hero. You just needed one person to care." They climbed into the ship. Kyle powered it up, fingers dancing over the controls. But just as the engine roared to life, a blast shook the platform. A security team had arrived. "Move!" Kyle shouted. He hit the lift. The ship rose fast. Shots flew past the windows. Solari screamed as sparks burst near her seat, but Kale didn't stop. He pushed the engines harder. The ship tore through the air. Below, the city lights faded. Above, the stars opened wide. They had escaped. For now. Solari looked back at the burning world behind them. Then, she looked at the human beside her, and for the first time in her life, she felt free. The galaxy wants her dead. The galaxy did not forget her escape. It could not forgive it. Within hours, her face was broadcast on every major channel across the systems. Enemy of peace, thief of secrets, dangerous traitor. HFY, Empire twisted the truth. They showed edited clips of her trial, her fall but not her courage. They erased the part where she crawled alone, bruised and broken. They replaced it with lies. Lies that fed the fear. And the human who helped her? He was called a threat to order, a criminal from a savage species. They said he had corrupted her. Now every bounty hunter, every law enforcer, and every scared citizen in the galaxy had a reason to bring her down. And him too. But while the Empire shouted through the stars, Kale kept her hidden. They found shelter on a moon no one cared about. No ships came here. No cameras worked here. The buildings were falling apart, and the people were few, but quiet. That's what Kale needed. A place to rest. A place to heal. Solari slept for almost 2 days. Her body had been pushed too far, but Kale stayed close. He guarded her like a soldier, fixed small machines to keep the room warm, and patched up what wounds he could. He never once left her side. When she woke up, her first words were soft. "You stayed." He nodded. "You're safe for now." Solari looked around the broken room. Cracked walls, weak lights, a single blanket shared between them. It was nothing, like her old palace. But somehow, it felt more honest, more real. As days passed, she began to speak again, first with short words, then stories. She told Kale about her homeworld, her training, the rules she lived under. She spoke of the silence expected of her, the cruelty masked as law, and the moment she realized she was no longer their puppet, but their enemy. Kale listened. He never interrupted. He never judged. In return, he told her about Earth, about growing up in the lower sectors, about how humans were often seen as less intelligent, less refined, until they surprised you. He told her how his brother had died in a war the galaxy refused to speak about, and how Kale had stopped believing in heroes. Until now. Solari blinked. You think I'm a hero? No, Kale said softly. I think you were broken, and still, you refuse to break. They trained together. Not in fancy gyms or with high-tech bots, but in small circles marked by rocks and dust. Kale taught her how to fight without relying on tech, how to move silently, how to defend herself if he wasn't there, and every day she grew stronger. Not just in body, but in heart. The girl who had once crawled in shame now stood tall again, even if only in secret. But peace doesn't last long when the galaxy is hunting you. One night, a ship landed nearby. Quiet, fast, unregistered. Kyle noticed the shadows moving before Solari did. Bounty hunters, well-armed, sent by someone who paid very well. Kale handed her a blade. Stay behind me. But to his surprise, she stepped forward instead. No, she said firmly. I won't hide again. They fought together, side by side. She moved with fire in her eyes like someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. When it was over, the attackers lay on the ground. Solari stood over them, panting, blood on her hands. She turned to Kyle. I'm not their princess anymore, she said. I'm something else now. He smiled. You're becoming what they feared most, a free mind. And though their faces were now printed on every bounty board in the stars, they didn't run in fear. They moved with purpose, because now the galaxy wanted her dead. And now, she was ready to answer. The hidden strength. The sky above the dead moon was gray. Dust storms blew across the surface, hiding the stars, but not the fire growing inside her. Solari no longer looked like the girl who had crawled before the galaxy. The bruises had faded. The fear in her eyes was gone. She stood taller now. Her steps were firm. Her voice didn't shake. Kale watched her from a distance as she trained alone. Every strike, every movement had power, not from her body, but from her will. The Empire had tried to break her. But instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. She wasn't just healing. She was preparing. Kale joined her in training. Every morning, they sparred without words. They fought until breath failed them. Then they sat together in the silence. No crowns, no titles, no lies between them. Just two souls, building each other. At night, she asked questions. Why do humans keep standing up even when they're beaten down? Kyle would chuckle. Because we're too stubborn to stay on the ground. Solari learned about honor. Not the fake kind printed on medals, but the kind found in quiet choices. In choosing to protect. In refusing to turn away. And Kale? He started seeing her not as someone he had rescued, but as someone he now respected. But danger was always close. Word reached them through smugglers. A price had been placed on Solari's head, higher than any before, dead or alive. One smuggler warned Kyle, even your own people might come for her. Solari heard this and didn't flinch. Let them come. That night, a different kind of storm arrived. 4 bounty hunters, silent, skilled, ruthless. They slipped into the ruins, expecting to find a weak girl and a foolish human. They found something else. Kyle fought with speed and precision, but it was Solari who shocked them all. She moved like a ghost, her blade an extension of her will. Every move was sharp, every choice filled with fury she had once buried deep inside. One bounty hunter shouted, "She's not supposed to fight like this." But she did. And when the fight ended, Solari stood over them, her eyes burning with a quiet fire. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply looked at Kale and said, "I'm not broken anymore." Kale looked at her with pride. "No," he said. "You're something far stronger now." Later that night, they sat beside the dim fire. Kale handed her an old data chip. I stole this from one of the bounty hunters. It holds a list of who paid for your capture. Zalari inserted the chip into the small device. Her eyes scanned the names, and then she froze. One name made her hand tremble. My own blood, she whispered. Kyle looked at her. Your family? She nodded slowly. My sister. She wants me erased, to take the throne alone. A deep silence followed. The fire crackled. Then Zalari stood up, clenched her fist, and looked at the stars through the cracked ceiling. She tried to bury me in shame, she said. But I will rise in truth. Kale stepped beside her. You're not just surviving anymore. You're becoming a force they never expected. And that night, for the first time, Zalari didn't feel hunted. She felt dangerous, because the girl who once crawled had found her strength. And the galaxy would never see her the same again. Betrayal and truth. The stars above were quiet, but trouble was already moving through the darkness. A coded message arrived through the black market relay, short, cold, and sharp. Return, and you will be forgiven. Your safety is guaranteed. We miss you, sister. It was signed by the ruling palace of Zinthar, signed by her blood. Zalari stared at the message without blinking. The same sister who once smiled beside her in royal portraits was now sitting on her stolen throne. And now she was offering forgiveness? No one offered peace without a hidden blade. Kale read the message beside her. It's a trap. Zalari didn't disagree, but she also didn't delete it. I need to know how deep this betrayal goes, she said softly. And if my people still remember who I am. Kyle shook his head. You don't owe them anything. But Zalari looked up, her eyes firm. I don't do this for them. I do this for the girl they left crawling. I do this for me. She left before dawn. Kale woke to find her gone. Only a short message was left on the cracked screen. If I don't return, remember me as someone who stood back up. He cursed, under his breath, and punched the wall. Then he grabbed his gear. There was no way he'd let her face this alone, not after how far they'd come. But Zalari was already aboard a small transport ship, heading straight to the royal planet. Alone, she walked into the same halls that had once carried her name in gold. Now the banner showed her sister, young, perfect, beloved by the media. Guards eyed Zalari with fake respect. The air smelled of perfume and poison. Her sister greeted her with a long hug, full of soft words and smiling eyes. It's good to have you home, she whispered. But Zalari heard the lie. Every guard, every servant watched her closely, not like family, but like prey. They sat down for a public meal. Cameras rolled, fake smiles, forced laughter. Her sister announced, My dear sister has returned and all is forgiven, but under the table a message slid into Zalari's hand from an old servant. They plan to execute you tonight, publicly, quietly. She didn't react. She didn't flinch. She just kept smiling. That night, in the royal chamber, her sister arrived, with guards. The blade in her hand sparkled. You should have stayed gone, she said, voice like honey. You were always too soft, too kind. That's why Father never chose you. Zalari stood in silence. She didn't beg. She didn't fight. Instead, she said, You never understood. Being kind is not weakness. It's strength you'll never have. Before her sister could strike, a blast shook the palace. Walls cracked. Lights flickered. And through the smoke, Kale appeared, armed, furious and fearless. I told you, he growled, you'd never face them alone. He moved like a storm, clearing guards with swift, silent blows. Zalari grabbed the blade from her stunned sister's hand, but she didn't strike. She simply dropped it at her sister's feet. I don't need to kill you, Zalari said, stepping back, because after tonight, They'll all know what you tried to do. She activated a small device. It had recorded everything, the lies, the plot, the betrayal. Every system broadcasted it across the stars. The galaxy watched. Again. But this time, Zalari wasn't crawling. She was standing tall, beside the human who refused to let her fall. Rise of the Broken. The galaxy didn't blink. It stared, across every system in every corner of space. From noble palaces to rusted mining stations, the truth echoed like thunder. The once humiliated princess had returned, not in chains, not in silence, but as a storm. The broadcast was unstoppable. Zalari's sister's betrayal, her plan to kill in secret, the lies whispered in golden rooms, all exposed. People who once laughed at the broken girl now watched with uneasy silence. Some in shame, others in awe. The Empire tried to spin the story, tried to shut the signal down. But it was too late. Truth travels faster than lies when someone brave enough dares to speak it. Zalari stood at the steps of the palace, no crown on her head, no army at her back. Just Kale beside her, bloodied, tired, and alive. Crowds gathered outside the gates. Some came to protest, some came to worship. But all came to see. I was broken, Zalari said aloud. Her voice, though tired, reached through the air. And while the galaxy watched, you let me crawl. You turned away. The crowd was silent, but one didn't. One human refused to turn his eyes. He didn't save a princess. He saved a person. She turned to Kale, her voice softening. And because of him, I remembered who I am. The crowd listened, not because they had to, but because her words pulled something ancient out of them. Honor, regret, and the need to be better. And then something happened that shook the Empire deeper than any rebellion. People began to kneel, not in worship, not in fear, but in apology. Even soldiers lowered their weapons. Even nobles stepped back. Something had changed, and they could all feel it. She had no need to fight anymore. The war was over. The lies were broken. In the days that followed, Kale and Zalari vanished from the public eye. Some say they left for a distant moon to live in peace. Others believe they travel between stars, helping those the galaxy tries to forget. But one truth remains. The girl who once crawled alone became a symbol the galaxy could no longer ignore, and the human who stood up for her reminded them all of a simple truth. One act of kindness can bring an empire to its knees.